Hello all and welcome to the Kontakt Script Programmer. We're going to look at 4.3, the file selector today. The file selector is really exciting because we can actually start to connect things together. Okay, so we're going to start building this and it's going to be a pretty fun script. This one in particular just lets us know that a file has been correctly identified as a MIDI file. It doesn't actually do any of the loading or anything like that that we might expect from our own patches. So, the very first part, on initialization, we set the UI height to be 5. Set UI height is really cool because we can, if I just bring up another patch here. Here we go. So, with set UI height, it actually changes the UI height, as you'd imagine. So, we can do it in pixels, or we can do it in the grid format. Set UI height, so we can do it in pixels _pix, or we could do it like this, and if we end on, we get a different size shape. So if we say for instance, if we make perf view, make the performance view, then when we go out of it, we actually have a larger window to play with. So handy little tip to begin with. Secondly, we declare the base path, so the browser path. This one is going to be actually pulling MIDI files from our computer, so you need to go and grab some MIDI files, just do a quick Google search online or output some yourself. We're not actually going to be using them. So if you copy and paste this, it won't work because it's in comments, and unless your user is users and your username is username, which would be kind of boring. But maybe that's who you are, who knows? So what we do is we set a base path to equal the path where the MIDI files are. Mine is actually in this path, so if I go to my Finder and I go to desktop, I look down in my MIDI files and they're actually there. So to find out what this path is, all I need to do is click on, right click or double click or two-fingered click or whatever. I'm on a MacBook Pro, so it's two-fingered click. I get info and it says, yeah, it's in Weaver, users, Weaver, desktop, MIDI files. Okay, so I can actually just copy and paste this whole thing and pop it into here. And it will show me that's the path for it. Okay, so if you're not used to command line programming, that's the way I do it. And that's the easiest way to do it, I think, is by just copy and pasting from the get info. If you're on a PC, you've probably just got to grab the top area where it has the directory information. From there, we declare a file name and a file path. Kontakt kind of jumps around a little bit in some of these examples, so even though we declare them here, we don't actually play with them until later down. Don't stress about that too much. It's just part of how we write code in Kontakt. We will come back to certain areas as we go through it. From there, we declare a UI file selector called file browser. The file selector is actually what we're going to be playing with today, as you can see there, UI file selector. And we declare a browser ID. The reason we need a browser ID is so that we can pass the information from the file browser. We get the UI ID of it for the browser ID for these controls later. Control parameter file type, column width, height, width. So from there, we set the control parameter in a string to the browser ID, which we've just assigned from the file browser UI ID, to the control parameter base path, which if we look that up real quick, we can see there are some of the controls in file browser. So control parameter base path sets the base path of the UI file browser, can only be used in initialization callback, and don't have too many subfolders. The column width sets the width of the browser columns. The way we're actually going to be building this today is going to be, in your vision, is this way, with separate little boxes. It's like a table for it's a little file browser essentially. So the column width will be set here. The file path can only be used in the initialization callback, and it's used to grab the last status of the browser. And the file type can either be, it's a native instruments file type, so we can't use ni underscore anything because that's used for their own version, or native instruments own programming. So in the initialization callback, the file type for the file selector can either be MIDI, audio, or an array. So those are the types that we can call from. So in this instance, we're calling set control parameter browser ID, control parameter file type, native instruments file type MIDI. So it's only going to see MIDI files. So if there are no MIDI files in that desktop folder, we won't see them. The control parameter browser ID, the column width, height, and width are also set here. And then we're moving the control to a better location. From there, we declare two buttons, a previous and a next button, and we move those around. And we declare a loaded MIDI file ID, which is just going to be the thing that checks if it's a MIDI file, we pass yes. If it's not a MIDI file, we pass no, essentially. So on the asynchronous complete, if the native instrument's async ID is -1, which is what we've set earlier on, we're going to load the MIDI file ID as -1, and then we can check the exit status and say it's not found if the exit status is 0. So if it jumps out of this, it's 0. Otherwise, we say it has been correctly loaded. Okay, we have a couple of end-if statements, and then on our UI controls, when we play with the file browser, it sets the file name, and we do fs get file name. So if I jump through a few of these, we can see it returns the file name of the last selected UI file in the UI browser, and we can either return 0, 1, or 2. So the UI ID would be browser ID, and the return parameter will be 0, 1, or 2. 0 will say it has no extension, 1 will say it has an extension, or it returns a file name with the extension, and 2 returns the whole path, which is what we're going to be using primarily. So in this file browser, we get the file name, fs get file name, browser ID 0, so without the file, without the appending .mid, and the file path is going to get the whole path. The load MIDI file ID is going to say load MIDI file at the file path, which is going to then jump, it's going to change the load MIDI file or the load MF ID so that it's not -1, which means then it says it loads the MIDI file properly. From there, we have the same kind of thing with previous and next. They're very similar. So fs navigate actually moves around the file selector, so we can actually do that from inside Kontakt. And 0 moves backwards and 1 moves forwards. So that's what the end of these are. And that's really the only difference between these two. We have the same kind of stuff as here. We're just setting the name so that it's not -1. Okay, and when it's not -1, then we've loaded it correctly. Again, this patch doesn't actually do anything with the MIDI. It's just passing MIDI information into a file browser and saying, is it MIDI information? Yes, it is. So let's go ahead and build this and see how we go. So I'm going to need a fair bit of space because it's a pretty big patch. It's probably one of those ones where I would start looking into using like Sublime, but again, I'm just going to keep it really, really basic so that anyone can use this if they are into it. So if you are into it, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, and make sure that you maybe hit me up and say hello. If there's something that you think I need to cover, yeah, just let me know. I've just set up the Facebook page, so you can find this now on Facebook, and yeah, you'll hopefully it's helping someone with this or all this reference stuff. So I've just done the declare file name, declare file path, then we declare a file selector and a browser ID, and the browser ID is get UI ID file browser. We set the control parameter string to browser for the browser, not browser, ID, and control parameter base path at base path. Okay, set the control parameter for browser ID to control parameter file type, and the file type will be a MIDI file. Remember, it can either be MIDI audio or an array. I don't know why I keep writing browser. Parameter column width is 180. control parameter browser ID. Now I'm focusing so much on not writing browser that I'm making all sorts of other mistakes. Browser ID control parameter width 550. Move control pixels. So we don't actually really need to move this around. I mean, we need to move it a little bit because otherwise it's going to be at 1.1, but not a massive problem. So we've done those early parts. Now we need to move on to the UI buttons, which are previous and next, and move those around to 5.1 and next to 6.1. Declare load MIDI file ID and load MIDI file ID as -1 and on. Okay, so that's our first part. Now we need to on asynchronous complete if native instruments async ID is load MIDI file ID. So this is basically saying we're breaking it if it's still -1. If it hasn't loaded anything, then we don't do anything. If the native instruments async exit status is 0, so if there's been an error, so if it's run through and it hasn't correctly identified it, we will set MIDI file not found. Otherwise, we don't really need to run a condition there. File loaded, and then let's do a little add in the file name just for fun. And if and on. So on the UI controls, oops, I got way too many. File browser, file path, a file name, sorry. fs underscore get file name browser ID 0. Don't forget the little $sign. And the file path, which is fs get file name browser ID 2. Return the whole file path. Load mf ID is load MIDI file at file path and on. Okay, now the next two are pretty much the same thing, so I'm going to do a really quick run through of these. fs navigate browser ID 0 at file name is equal to fs get file name browser ID 0 and at file path fs get file name browser ID 2 load mf ID is equal to load MIDI file at file path, and the previous one is going to go 0, okay, because we don't want to keep triggering it, so we want to just change it. On UI control, the next one, fs navigate, oh man, browser ID, so we're going forward instead of backwards, and then these ones are just exactly the same as earlier. Again, it's just handy to write this stuff out. Yeah, so hopefully these are making sense. This one's really exciting because we start passing some information compared to the next one, which is crap. It's just UI labels. Not that I've got anything against, well, I suppose I do. I must have something against UI labels if I think they're crap. Hey, so MIDI file. File path. It's good. Next. Angst. Big name for a band. All right, did we stuff it up? Yep, we did. What did we stuff up? File browser was not declared. That can't be good. Declare file browser or browser ID. Did I declare the UI? Oh, there we go. That's supposed to be browser, not UI file. Okay, so there we go. So when we open this up now, we've got no message, which is good. Okay, we probably should pop in message just like this so that we sort of flush out any previous messages. Good thing to get in the habit of doing. And inside that file, just like inside my Finder file, I've got 3 files: callback, I want to be sedated, and things that never happen MIDI. They're just sort of from all over the place. So callback, I can't even remember where callback's from. I want to be sedated, I don't know where that's from. I think it's from Pure Data. And things that never happen is one of the band songs I'm working with. So if we hit next and previous, we'll get MIDI file not found because we haven't selected anything yet. If we click on one of them, we load the file right there. I want to be sedated, and I can hit next and previous, which is really, really cool. So we can start now plugging in files from outside Kontakt into Kontakt and using them. So Kontakt now becomes kind of an effect machine as well, or a MIDI sequencer, as well as just a sample engine. So it actually does a lot of this different stuff. I really, really like this functionality. We will go ahead and build some more things of this. We're going to have a lot of fun with this. So maybe build it again yourself if you're worried about this sort of stuff, or if you're worried about grouping different things. Remember, you can use different file selectors. So maybe go through and see how many different formats you can put in. You could do a MIDI and an array and a audio one. You can use 15 of them if you really want to, which could be interesting, maybe. So we'll see what happens. I will see you next time in 4.4 as we get into more UI stuff. See you then.